Now, for more on China's housing market, let's bring in PSW Investments Managing Director Phil Davis. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Hi, Rachelle.
Now, Phil, how would you characterize the current state of China's housing market?
To some extent, it's a bit overheated, but a lot of it is due to, obviously, there's an amount of speculation in the housing market that is probably exacerbating the problem.
So in an effort to provide more affordable homes, because we're seeing a lot of these prices still, as you mentioned, still hot at the moment, we know that China plans to build 2 million new units of public housing. What are your thoughts on this provision to make more affordable housing?
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I mean, if you want Beijing to remain a lively, growing city and to allow the workers to come in and create new industries, you're going to need some affordable housing. And I think adding, I believe it's almost 10% more housing to what they have now is a fantastic idea. I also am very in favor of building that whole new city. Is it Xi'an, is it? I'm not sure the pronunciation, but it's a great idea also.
Oh, the new special economic zone.
Yeah.
Yes, that's definitely seen a boon, especially when it comes to things like construction and infrastructure. Now, speaking of work, as you mentioned that, what do these developments mean for the future of China's household registration, or also known as hukou?
Well, I think that one trend that we're watching that's very interesting is you have this phenomenal amount. 70% of the millennials are owning their own home now, it's an incredible number. I mean, in the U.S., by comparison, or Europe, it's around 35%. So half as many millennials in the U.S. and Europe own homes. You know, one thing that's driving that, of course, is the fact that the parents realize, and they instill it in the children, that long term, if you want to be a good marriage prospect as a man, you're going to have yourself a house for the you get married. It takes a bit of pre-planning these days.
Now, as part of that, seeing a lot of speculative buying, and we know that the government has really tried to crack down on this by putting housing restrictions in place, really trying to make some reforms to really cool the housing market and some of this speculative buying. What sort of results are we seeing?
Well, I don't believe that we're really. I think the problem is, in some part, it's a lack. You don't really have property taxes the way we do in the West, and I think that's a bit of a problem. And there have been haphazard solutions that are being done on a regional basis, like on a city by city basis or region by region basis, and that causes. What's essentially happening, though, is one city will start putting on some property taxes, and all they do is chase all the speculators over to another city. And then that one becomes a hot zone, and then they change the regulations there, and everybody runs to the next place. I think there needs to be more of a cohesive national policy that reins in some of the speculation. I mean, I heard people are getting fake divorces so they can get around the housing policy. So a couple will get a fake divorce so they can each buy themselves a house.
People are certainly getting creative in an effort to snap up a home. So speaking of that, if you're a first-time buyer or just everyday Chinese and you're looking at what's happening in the market, how are they coping?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of there are desirable markets. Now, there are plenty of places to go, and this is the interesting thing because I think there's a little more pressure where unlike the U.S., where when I got out of college, the Japanese were speculating in the United States. This is in the mid-'80s. And property prices had skyrocketed. And New York City was simply unaffordable. There was no way to, everybody wanted to live in New York. It was just too expensive. So we went and moved somewhere else. People my age went to Boston. We went to Chicago and places like that. I think there's a little bit less of a desire for some of the Chinese younger people to move into the other cities. But there are plenty of great places to go right now that are not that crowded, not that expensive by comparison.
And we're certainly seeing the same with a lot of cities around the world. Same thing with London, and there just not being enough housing to go around. We're seeing now governments investing more in infrastructure, in things like transportation, to try to get people to be able to commute from further away. So with that being said, what's your outlook for the housing market in China, especially when it comes to what you see as the bright spots and the potential challenges?
I think that you're going to have what's considered a bubble burst. I mean, if rates climb up, for one thing, and borrowing costs increase, it's going to cause a bit of a bubble because the speculators are kind of expecting to be able to sell off their homes And another thing, like I said, though, I know that you're going to move towards a property tax, and a property tax very, very much changes the formula of the value of a home. If you have to buy the home and pay the taxes on the home on an ongoing basis, it's not the same at all as when you're just buying a home and you sell it for a profit. Um, so there will be a correction at some point, but I think long term, it's such a robust and growing economy. I think that being a Chinese home speculator is not a terrible idea as long as you can ride out what's going to be probably a fairly painful dip.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Phil Davis, Managing Director at PSW Investments.